practice. There's absolutely life after death. Now, it's important that you understand that I'm saying that not based on my personal experience. I'm not sitting before you as someone with specific memories of a past life that I can say to you, this is my personal experience. But I'm saying this from that which I've heard from people in whom I have great trust. Because there's really only two ways of knowing things in the world. Either you experience them yourself, or you trust people who have experienced them. I have no interest in sticking my finger in a light socket. People I trust have told me, I've never done it. I could not sit here and guarantee you that you would get electrocuted. I have not had that experience, but people I trust have told me, do not stick your finger in there, you will get electrocuted. I believe them. In the same way, people I trust, those I know personally who are living, and the saints and the sages and the rishis who have passed this on in the form of scripture for thousands of years have said, yes. So I believe them. But for me, on a personal level, the other reason I believe is it's the only thing that makes any sense to me. I have a very great belief in order and plan in the universe, which I had even before I was religious. Even before I had had any experience of God, I believed very deeply that there was a plan, that there was an order. I was a scientist. I had spent time in science laboratories, and I knew how difficult it was to make anything happen in a lab. You know, you get an assignment and you've got your beaker and you've got your Bunsen burner and you've got your crucible and you've got and you've got an assignment. All right, you have to put this in and put that in and do this and turn on the Bunsen burner and then watch your crucible. And in most cases, you couldn't get anything to happen. And sometimes you'd get a bad smell and sometimes something would catch fire. And the idea that knowing everything that we know today, because we really do know an incredible amount, we still cannot produce life in a laboratory. You cannot produce, forget a human, you cannot produce a mosquito, you cannot produce a leaf. The very best we've been able to do with thousands of years of science and hundreds of years of modern science, the very closest we've been able to come is I can make you a Xerox copy. I cannot produce life. And so the idea that somehow it happened randomly when the very best scientists, knowing exactly what life is made of, biologists, botanists could tell you this leaf, here's exactly the elements it's made of, here's how the molecules are bonded together, cannot create it. So the idea that it all just happened randomly, that there was no order, there was no plan, there was no consciousness or intelligence, doesn't work for me scientifically. So I've always believed that there was an order, that there was a plan, and the idea that we are just born once, you have a good run of it, you're lucky, you don't have such a good run of it, too bad, and there it is. It's over. It never has fit with me. What doesn't make sense. And the idea that there is a continuity makes much more sense. I believe much more in cycles than in lines. And the idea that there's a cycle of life. Everything in nature is a cycle. Right? The leaves fall off the tree in the autumn. They're crushed under the snow. They become the soil for new growth in the springtime. It's a cycle. It was never actually destroyed. Newton tells us the same thing about matter, about energy. So if it's not being destroyed and it's not being created, it's being recycled. And the idea that, to me, that there's an intelligence that knows how this recycling is happening, that's aware of the continuity of energy, of matter, that makes much more sense to me than everything being random. So yes, I think there is, very much. What is the importance of Agni or fire in the Hindu tradition? Why is it such an important symbol? And why, when people die, are they cremated rather than being buried, for example? Well, there's several aspects of it. The first is fire purifies. That's what fire does. It burns. It's the dharma of fire. It burns. But in the process of burning, it purifies. So if you got a splinter in the bottom of your foot while you were walking outside, and you came in, and somebody was going to remove that splinter for you, what we would do is we'd find ourselves a little sewing needle or a pair of tweezers. And we would then, since we don't have an autoclave handy, we would then take a match, light the match, or turn on the fire on the stove, and put that needle or those tweezers into the fire for 30 seconds or a minute to sterilize it. Because otherwise, when we cut into your skin, we could end up taking out the splinter but giving you an infection. The needle could have bacteria on it. The tweezers could have bacteria on it. When we cut into your skin, you want to make sure that whatever goes inside is purely sterile, right? This is why doctors wear gloves. It's why all the instruments that are used in operations are sterile. Because you can't introduce germs into the body or you'll end up with an infection, okay? So fire sterilizes. It removes all the impurities, whatever was there on the needle, whatever was there on the tweezers. In 30 seconds or a minute in even a single match flame, totally pure. Once it cools down, ready to be stuck into your foot safely. So fire purifies. Now, in most cases, it's not our needles we need purified. It's aspects of ourselves. Now, this is while we're still living. We'll come to death in a moment. But the reason that, for example, we perform all of these yagna ceremonies, the fire ceremonies, is it purifies us. Not the core of who we are. The core of who we are is pure and perfect and divine. But it purifies all of that which is not self. Like all of the bacteria that's gotten onto the sewing needle, right? The needle is fine. Nothing wrong with the needle itself. as it's moved through the world, it's acquired a whole bunch of germs. You never know where it's fallen down, who stepped on it, who sneezed on it. So all these things that are not needle have made a home on top of the needle. In the same way, you are soul, pure, perfect. But as you've moved through the world, you've acquired things that are not you. An ego, desires, anger, grudges, an identity. Who you think you are, that chances are is based very much on this body. Chances are that there's a lot of your identity that's based on how tall you are, how much you weigh, the color of your skin, whether you ever end up with a pimple on your nose or not, how you do on exams in school, who you eat lunch with. All these sorts of things become part of our identity. What sorts of activities I do after school. Am I an athlete, or am I an artist, or am I a musician, or am I a babysitter, or what do I do? These all become parts of my identity. But that's not you. That's not really you. That's what we call the false self. Now, simply thinking I'm an artist compared to I'm an athlete, no harm in it. The problem comes, the suffering comes, as we move through life, as we identify more and more with that which is not self, the physical body, what we do. That leads to anger. It leads to jealousy. It leads to fear. It leads to competition. It leads to anguish. It leads to frustration. It leads to all of these things. Despair, right? If I'm identified by the group of people I eat lunch with, that is my tribe. These are my people. And I take my lunch tray to sit with them one day, and they all stand up in unison and go and sit at a different table. It's going to hurt me, right? It's going to really, really hurt me. And I might go home and cry because I've identified so strongly with those people, that group, this relationship, that even the momentary rejection by them is so painful that if I can even stay in school for the rest of the day, it's a miracle. Right? So this is where it happens. So then we come to fire. So when we perform the fire ceremony, what we are giving up is all of that keeps me from realizing I'm soul, I'm divine. So all of the stuff that worries about the pimples on my nose and worries about the color of my skin or my weight or my height or who I'm eating lunch with or what college I'm going to go to or who's doing better than I did on an exam or the fight I had with my mom or, any of those things. And the messages that they give me about myself. I'm stupid, I'm this, I'm that, or the flip side. I'm so smart, they're stupid. Either way. It's a problem either way. Whether you think you're the stupid one and they're the smart one, or you're the smart one and they're the stupid ones, either way it's a problem. So we offer that to the fire. With the prayer, oh God, purify me of all of that ignorance. Let me know who I really am, which is this beautiful divine consciousness, this love, this spirit, this soul, so that I'm not impacted and affected by all of these things.